So here are some science-backed tips to manage shyness. The first one is exposure therapy, and this is one of the most popular and most studied covers. So it's when, ooh, I thought it was bad. It just so happened that I didn't know much about the topic, about the item, about the person. It wasn't that bad after all. So we call this in psychology as the repetition normalization. The more you keep on repeating the activity, the more on you keep on repeating exposure to the person that you are shy to talk to, it becomes so normal that you start letting go of the inhibitions of why you are afraid of failure. I've spoken to the CEO many, many times now, and every time he speaks, I thought that he would be mad at me because I would make mistakes. But even if I made mistakes, he wasn't that mad. In fact, he told me that I can be better and that I'm doing well in my job. Right? So that's called repetition and normalization. So many times getting exposed frequently on something that you are shy or afraid of can help your brain be accustomed to it. Number two, deep observation, meaning you don't need to be exposed to the person or exposed to the idea, but you can look for similar instances happening with other people. So for example, when I'm afraid of a client or when I'm afraid of a person, I don't need to talk to the person immediately, but I will observe how the person talks with other people. And that allows me to be more exposed again to that person. So if you're a salesperson, what do you usually do? You research the person online, you stalk his Facebook, you stalk his Twitter account, because that makes you more familiar about the person. When you start talking to the person in real life, you feel that you have control. And so what happens? Your confidence level goes up, right? And finally, role modeling. One thing about exposure is that if you can't be exposed to the real thing, expose yourself to someone who you know is able to overcome the same fears or the same sources of shyness. So if you have fears of public speaking, if you have shyness when it comes to doing presentations, look for someone that you think, I want to become like that person. I want to become as confident as he is when he pitches his PowerPoint slides. And the more you look at that person, the more you get to absorb and steal the best practices until you're able to create a version of a better version of you, right? So that's exposure therapy, right? So one example, one of the classic exposure therapy studies is people who have fear of spiders. And exposure therapy starts with, instead of seeing a spider immediately, constantly for a period of time, they get exposed to a picture of a spider. And then after a few months, they end up looking at a spider, a real one, inside a box. You can't touch it, but it's enclosed. And then some psychologists and psychiatrists will evolve into doing virtual reality. So augmented reality of touching spiders. And then finally, when the person becomes more accustomed, right, the person ends up touching the real spider. The reason for that is because you're trying to tame your muscle memory into believing that the last time I did it, I wasn't as shy as I was before. And you gradually change it over and over again. That's exposure therapy, right? So when you have those folks who need to become more confident in public speaking, it's simply because they